In today's video, we are going to learn all about crosstab. Now, what is crosstab? It's just a table which has headings for rows as well as columns. Now, that you will say is very common. Yes, it is, but it's a bad idea from analytics point of view. So first we'll learn why crosstabs are bad and how to convert them into a good format, which is called tabular, and how to do it in the most efficient way. Before we go ahead, why don't you like, share and subscribe. So now, let's understand the problem with crosstab. We have row headings and column headings. Let's take an example. This is attendance data. Every row employee and every column date. Now what will you do? More and more columns you will keep adding first, second, third, 31st. Now what? Most people will copy the sheet and put it as Feb, March, April, 12 sheets in a year. And at the end of the year, what are you going to do? Save as 2022, 2023, and you will have multiple files with 12 sheets each. Now at the end of 3 years, someone is going to ask you for a report. Show me the trend in absenteeism. And now, can you imagine what you have to do? Open 3 files containing lots of rows, 12 sheets, and create a complex formula which covers so many things. Even the thought is inefficient. You're going to spend hours making that report. And that is why crosstab is bad. But what is the good format? Well, it's tabular format. What does that mean? It still has rows and columns, but the headings are only for columns. So I'll show you a checklist of 10 items. Clean data checklist. I have a detailed video on this topic. Have a look. Now in our example, what is the right format for attendance data? Just 3 columns. Employee ID, date and status. That's it. So now the question is, how do you convert that crosstab data into tabular data? Obviously, you don't want to do it manually by copy paste and transpose hundreds of times. So there are 2 ways of doing it. One using traditional Excel and one using Power Query. So I'm going to show you both. And let's move to the studio to see a detailed demo. So we want to convert this crosstab into tabular. Why? Because we don't want it to grow horizontally. And in this format, I can handle any number of employees, any number of dates very easily. For this to work, press Alt, D and P. So when you press Alt, D, it shows that it is waiting for the next keystroke, which is P. Now why Alt, D, P? Because there's the old pivot table or pivot table dialog. In the older version, it was in data menu, so Alt, D and P for pivot table. Now, very carefully, you have to choose this multiple consolidation ranges option. We don't have multiple pieces, it's just one piece, but still. Then click on next, skip this step and now choose the range. Click inside, Ctrl A will select everything. Make sure you click on add and then say finish. Now it seems to have created a pivot table which is looking weird, but we are not really interested in the pivot table. We are interested in the grand total. When you double click in pivot table, grand total or anything in data area, it's going to give me the raw data, but this time it will give it to me in tabular format. So that's how we use a feature of pivot table to convert crosstab into tabular. Now this method is okay, but if I add more data, I have to repeat the whole process. So that's why there is a better method using Power Query. Now in order to use Power Query, we will convert this data into a table first. So insert table. It should auto select. It does have headers and that's it. Now it's a good idea to give a name to the table. So go to table design. Generic name will come, but I'm going to call it my data. Now I'm going to close this file and create a blank new file, and through Power Query we will open the earlier file. Data, get data, from file, Excel workbook. So now in the navigator dialog, it is showing me my table. If I use the sheet, it will show you all sorts of junk. So table is always better. Now we want to clean the data. We click on transform button. This opens Power Query. It's showing you the data as it is right now. And we know that this column is good and these are the bad columns. So you select the good column and right click there and choose unpivot other columns. And that's it. It converted the data into tabular. Now just to show you what happened, I'm going to remove this step. Click on the cross, we are back to previous step. What does unpivot really mean? If you look at the data, this looks as though it was a pivot table at some point where employee name was in the row area, date was in column area and status was in the value area. It's not a real pivot table, but it looks like a pivot table. So I'm undoing that pivot table by saying unpivot other columns. Now why did I select the good column? I could have selected the bad columns and said unpivot these columns, but that hard-codes those columns. And it's much easier to select the good column because good columns are few, bad columns are many. That's why right-click on the good column and say unpivot other columns. So far it's okay, but in this particular case, we need to do something more. It didn't know what to call it, so we'll just rename it to status. Attribute should be a date, but remember in our old way of capturing data in the BAT format, these were just numbers, they were no dates actually. The month was written as sheet name and the year was written as file name, but now we want to convert these to proper dates. Now that can be done by using add column. Select this column, go to add column from example. Examples we will give based on the selected column. So now it's showing me an empty column. It's asking me for this row and for this number 1, what do you really want? So I want, let's say 1st Jan 2022. It didn't understand it fully, so it repeated the same date. Not a good idea, but now I want to tell it further by giving one more example. Say for this row, I want it to be 2nd Jan. So now it says, oh, when there is 1 here you want this, there is 2 here you want this. So now when you click OK, it's actually going to do the job correctly. Now the name of this column is merged, so let's call it date. Now we don't need this column at all, so we'll remove it. And I want date as the 2nd column, so I'll just drag it. And now I'm done. So I go to the Home tab, close and load to. This time I will import it in a table, but if the data was large, I could have imported in data model. Now we got clean data converted from crosstab to tabular. Now just to complete the story, let's open the original data, make some changes and see what happens. So here I'm going to add a new row. And we'll put S, save this file, close it, go back to our combined tabular data, right click and refresh. And that is the beauty of Power Query. First time, little bit of effort, it remembers all the steps, and next time onwards, just refresh. This is a crosstab, row headings, column headings, but instead of one, we have multiple. Usually they will be in different sheets, but right now they are together. Now I want to convert them to tabular and combine them. Now notice this has some names and these names are outside, which is a bad idea. So I converted the data itself to table, and each table has been given the correct name. North, east, south, west and so on. So these names are irrelevant for us. Anyway, now let's combine this. This also can be done using two methods, the older method and Power Query method. So older method first. You know the story now, all DP. And now we do have multiple ranges. So choose multiple range, click here, click on the next button. This is a tricky question. So right now we will go with the default, go to the next one and we will select range. Now notice these are tables. So if I click inside the table and press Ctrl A, it's only going to select the data portion of it. We don't want that. So if you want to make sure the entire table is selected with a single Ctrl A, make sure you click in the header. Now Ctrl A will select the whole range, and this time I have multiple, so I'm going to repeat this process for all the tables. So this is north, east, south and west. Remember to click on the add button. So far so good. Now I go to next and I want to create a pivot table like before. This time it has combined all of them. Again, I'm not interested in it. I double click on it and I get the data. Very good. The only problem is now our north, south, east, west got changed to item 1, item 2. How do we do that? Well, let's go back to the pivot table and press Alt DP. That dialog still comes. And this is a place where we have to change it. Back. That is the page field. Each piece is called a page because typically it used to come from a different sheet or a page. And it gives default names item 1 to 3. I want to give the name, so I say I will create page fields. Now when you click on next, it is still asking me for the ranges and we have already selected the ranges. But in addition, it is saying page fields. Do you want to give a unique custom name to each piece? Yes. Now these are 4 pieces and this is 4. No, that's not the case. This is only one set of names we want to give. So not 4. Now this is north, south, east, west. Just for demo, I am just typing N. Now notice first one is N. Click on second one, it disappears now. South, third, east, fourth, west. So this is one set of names. Now notice it remembers north, south, east, west. Now why is there a second piece? Oh, maybe this 2 regions become one zone. So now let's say this one is called zone 1 and this one is also called zone 1 and these 2 are called zone 2. So 1 set of names, 2 set of names, 3, 4, like that, up to 4 set of names we can create. Alright, very good. Now we click on finish and we get the pivot table. Nothing seems to have changed except for the fact that we have page 1 and page 2 and we have zones as well as these. So what do? We just double click on the pivot table and we get crosstab data converted properly to tabular data. So this is the legacy old traditional way of doing it. But now let's see another method where we use Power Query to combine this data. And you know what to do in Power Query. All inputs should be tables, which we already have, and they should be given sensible names, which also we have done. So let's close this file, create a blank new file, import this data into Power Query and see how to combine it and convert it to tabular. So data, get data from file, Excel. So now the navigator is showing us all the tables. Oh, there happens to be some other table which I'm not interested in. And of course the sheets. So we want tables. Now you may make a mistake here by saying, oh, I want 4 tables. So select multiple and I'm going to select east, north, south, west. That is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because if you say load now, what is it going to do? There's a blank file, remember. It's going to import all 4 pieces of data in 4 different sheets. And what is the point? We just recreated the old file. So we don't want this to happen. So let's start all over again. So we are back to the navigator dialog. And what do we do differently this time? Well, choose one of the tables, anyone will do, and click on transform data. It's going to start Power Query and show you the data as it is. Nothing great has happened. Now it's important to see what happens on the applied steps. First step is the source, which is the original file. And then we chose the table east. So it is showing the table and it automatically detected data type. Remember, ABC 1 to 3 means the data type has not been determined. It's called any, and then it does automatic data detection. Now it is number and text. All good, but we really don't want this table alone. So we delete these steps. Change type, not required. Navigation, not required. Now it is showing me the entire structure of that Excel file. So Excel file has sheets and tables. So it's showing me both. I am not interested in sheets. So the kind column, open the drop down and get rid of sheets. That leaves only tables. Very good, but we are only interested in the 4 tables. This one is the odd one. I don't want it. So make sure you click inside the cell and then say I don't want this. Does not equal whatever. Now we are left with exactly what we want. It is still not expanded, but this is what we want to work on. Now we are interested in the name of the table and the table data itself. These 3 columns are useless. So we'll select the columns we want, click, shift click, right, and then remove other columns. Great. Now what are these tables? If you look at them, click on them, it'll actually show the table one by one. You see, it's actually showing you the data of the table. We don't want that. It added a step. I don't want change. So here, if I click on it right now, it is adding a step and expanding the table. I don't want that to happen. What I want is here itself, it should expand the tables, and that's why we have this button. This is the expand table button. Now it's showing me all the columns, and do you want to expand? We say yes, which is great. It actually expanded all the tables and the name of the table is still preserved. That's why we kept the name column. All good, but one bad thing. Instead of just product Jan, Feb, March, it is showing data.product, data.jan. Why is that? Because earlier that column was called data. I don't want this kind of weird naming. No problem. We'll remove that step Again click on expand, and this time we will say I don't want the original column, which is data dot. Fine. Now it will do the job. Now you must be understanding this is still a crosstab because these are bad columns, but we know unpivot now. In this case we have name of the table itself, which is a good column, name of the product, which is also a good column. So select both of them, right click and unpivot other columns. Now this was say quantity, and this one should be a date. Let's say these are dates from 2022. Again we have a problem like before. So you know what to do. Select the column, add column from example from selection 1st Jan 2022, and this time it is smart enough to understand it. Everything is good, so we click OK. Now notice this is merge column. This works on text, so this is still not been recognized as a date column. So click on this, convert it to date, give it a proper name, delete this column, rearrange if required, and then close and load. This time we will close and load to table. So everything, multiple crosstabs, converted to tabular and consolidated while retaining the name of the source. Brilliant. Now we can create pivot tables, pivot charts, or whatever formulas you want to put in Excel. And just to complete the topic, let's also see what happens when the original data changes. So I have this file here. Let's add a new record and call it 111, which is this table, North table. Let's also do something else. Let's add a completely new table, and this time I'm going to give 999. Save the file, close the file, right click here, come and refresh, and predictably enough everything has been done beautifully. So now I hope you have got a much better idea of what a crosstab is, how to find whether something is a crosstab, and how to convert it to good format. But wait, there is one more scenario left. Currently we had a good crosstab. I know crosstab is bad, but good crosstab means it has only one level of heading. Now I will show you a bad crosstab. Now we have two layers of heading. How are you going to convert it to tabular? So let's see that demo. Now let's increase the complexity further. This is a crosstab, but instead of having one set of headers, it has a dual header. This is the year, this is the month. This is again a very common input format, and we struggle with this. So we want to convert this also to tabular. How do we do that? Well, first of all, everything should be a table, you know that. So create a table. This time I know it does have headers, but those are bad merge cell kind of headers. So I'm going to say no, my table does not have a header. So it'll just put column 1, column 2. That's fine. And of course I'll call it M data because it has multiple headers. Fine. Now we'll open this file in Power Query and see what happens. So data, get data from file, Excel. So this is our table. Let's go to transform and see what can be done inside Power Query. This column is okay, but this is the problem. This null should be 2021 and this should be 2022. Now in order to make that, we have to rotate the table. It's like a transpose of the whole table, and that is done from here. Go to transform and just rotate the table around. So whatever is in the rows go to column, whatever is in column comes to rows. Nothing has changed. This was earlier a row, now it has become a column. Why did we do this? Oh, because once it is a column, we have a nice feature here called fill down. So now these gaps were filled. Very good. Now while it is so, notice that product column seems good. This one also seems like a good column except the fact that it doesn't have a title or a header, and these look like bad columns. So if we convert this row as a header, something better can happen. So now go to the Home tab and say the first row of data, consider it as a header. Right now there is no header, so it has just given generic column names. No problem. Use first row as header. Now we have product, good column, desktop, laptop, tablet, bad columns, and this is a good column but doesn't have a name, so I'm going to call it year. And now you know what to do. Unpivot others. So select these two good columns and say unpivot other columns, and now we have got the data even though the input data had multiple levels of headers. So now let's increase the complexity even further. We still have a crosstab, but we have 2 levels of headers for columns and 2 levels of headers for rows as well. No problem. Let's convert it to a table. Again, say no headers. Give it a name. I'll call it double header data. DH data. Data get data from file Excel workbook. So in the navigator, we choose this table and go to transform data. Now here itself we can see that column 1, this is north and this is south. So might as well fill it up. We know how to fill down. We also want to fill these gaps. And how do we fill those gaps? We know that. We want to transpose, isn't it? Okay. So we will transpose and fill these gaps. So far so good. But now if you just combine these two and use the earlier approach, it's not going to work because we have double layers here. So we need to do one more trick. Temporarily, we will combine this and this column and create one single column by saying merge columns. So right click and say merge columns. Now of course later on we will split them. Now to split them we'll need to separate them with something. So I'm going to choose equal to sign because very unlikely that equal to sign will be a part of text where data is coming from Excel. Now what should the column be called? Doesn't really matter. Now what happened? This column called merge column got created. Very good. Now we have north, 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 south, 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 something like that. Bad idea. Now what should we do? Transpose again. And now we can have this becoming the header. We know how to do that. Use first row as header. Now this guy doesn't have a nice name, so we want to call it region. Notice in our data the word region didn't even exist. These are products, yes, and these are the problematic ones, correct? No worries. Let's rename it properly. And now these two are good columns, so we are going to unpivot other columns. And now the only thing left is split this column because this is a combination. So right click, split column by delimiter. It has automatically detected that equal to sign is the delimiter. Now click OK and then let's just rename stuff. And finally, even in this complex scenario, we were able to convert data with multiple headers in rows and columns to tabular format and continue analyzing efficiently. I'm sure you found this useful. Start using it, but before that, subscribe, click the bell icon, like the video and share it with your colleagues and loved ones. If you have any queries, post them in comments. I'll be happy to solve your queries. Oh, there is a nice new feature called Super Thanks in YouTube. Check that out as well. So till next time, take care. Bye bye.